Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're able to watch this. I am re recording the information we shared at the coffee with the community this morning um, for those who are unable to attend it. So, this will be the same information that it was shared in the live coffee, and then I'm going to schedule a live follow up for any questions that you may have. Um, I'm going to ask people who attended the first one to not attend this one so that we don't take up the space. Thank you. So let's jump right into some of the information we shared during today's coffee, today being March 31st. So the agenda for this morning included some updates on our school closure, what you can expect regarding school communication, some details of our distance learning plan, and then we did leave some time for questions and some answers. So I'll go over some of the questions that were asked this morning by parents who attended, but we will also have a live Q&A tomorrow, April 1st at 8:30. So if you were unable to attend today's coffee, I'm going to ask you to watch this presentation and then show up to the live question and answers for April 1st. So just wanted to start off kind of acknowledging that we're all experiencing a pretty steep learning curve. Teachers, staff, kids, and you as well. So I just want to thank you for your patience, your grace, your understanding as overnight, we shifted from being a classroom-based school to essentially a virtual school. Your teachers are working really hard to make the most of this for kids. And we want to acknowledge that we know that it's really pushing all of us out of our comfort zones. Our kids are no exception to that. But thank you for your understanding and support as we make this transition. We find ourselves here in the early steep part of the curve, but together, we'll continue to make the most of this. Let me share some updates on closure. Um, Currently, the decision to remain closed through May 1st stands. If you are connected at all to Chino Valley School District, maybe you have a child in one of their schools, for example, or in a neighboring district, you may notice that we're pretty much in lockstep with the surrounding schools. This was a deliberate decision by superintendents, charter leaders to just be on the same page. So you may notice that our decisions are matching those of the schools and districts around us. That will be true as we move forward. And while currently we have plans, to close through May 1st. If that is extended or changed, you will be notified. Again, this is not a crystal ball predicting the future kind of thing. I cannot do that. But if we are extended, I just don't want anyone to be surprised if we happen to extend the closure. You're kind of watching how things are progressing in this pandemic. You know that it's likely that we may have to extend the closure. Again, if that's decided, we will share with you, and we will go from there. Another important update is CASP testing. So for our third graders on up, this is suspended for this year. That's not a school-based decision. That's a statewide decision to suspend state testing for this year. So I want to talk a little bit about communication, school to home communication, starting first with our teachers. On school days, their work hours are 8 to 3:30 p.m. So that's the time in which they'll be pushing information out to your kids via Seesaw or Google Classroom. It's also the time that they'll be responding. Sometime within that window, they'll be responding to your questions, emails, and so on. So just want to make that clear, because we know you have your obligations and responsibilities, and so for some of you, it may make sense to email your teacher, your child's teacher at 5 p.m., 9 p.m., 1 a.m., whatever works for you. But just know that teachers are expected to communicate during those school hours. You might hear from them outside of that, but they're under no obligation to do that. They're on the clock during the school hours. So that's when they'll be communicating to you. They'll primarily communicate through Seesaw and Google Classroom. Again, for all of you, we want to kind of limit the number of platforms that we're using, um, so that it's kind of just easy to navigate for you. We don't want to overwhelm you. Same thing goes for kids. So most of the content is being pushed out through Seesaw and Google Classroom. I know in the feedback survey, we sort of heard two trends in the feedback. Many of you appreciated the various platforms that we use to communicate. Others are feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So we're trying to find that right balance, so so that you're getting all the information, but you're um, not limited to just one place for it. And most importantly, for kids, we're trying to make that as routine as possible. In regards to school-wide communication, we're doing our best to kind of stay in a pattern as well. Weekly Wolf update, the robocall, those things we want to continue just in the times and dates that you expect them. Of course, anything that's urgently needing to be communicated, we're going to push out too. And yeah, and to thank our team who's on top of it, making sure that you're getting timely communication in a variety of ways. So you're staying up to speed on all things with our school. I'll talk about our distance learning plan. And somehow I managed to capture the most perfect moment where everybody's got a funny face going on. This was a team, your leadership and professional development team, worked over spring break to kind of put some pieces together. All teachers have been working hard. These guys just gathered during this day to put some finishing touches on our plan to continue providing distance learning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but just wanted to give kudos to these guys and all staff. So first, just kind of want to timeline what's been happening and then where we're headed. From March 16th, the first day of the closure, through this coming Friday, April 3rd, we've been in what we call a voluntary learning kind of plan. We pushed out resources, ideas, suggestions. You may have noticed there haven't been due dates, nor has there been grading. I'll talk a little bit as to why in a moment. Beginning Monday, April 6th, that's when we start compulsory distance learning. The shift, kids might not feel it. It'll be very familiar for students for what they've been experiencing, but for you to know that now assignments will be assigned, right, with due dates. They will be graded. We will be taking attendance. Although it's from, kids will continue to learn from home, now we'll shift away from voluntary towards compulsory or more obligatory distance learning. Naturally, some of you have been asking what's the difference or why. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that here. What's the difference between the two? To kind of better understand the difference here, kind of want to answer the question, well, why? Why offer voluntary versus compulsory? If you're connected to other schools in the area, you may have noticed that several of them just shut down completely. They're fully closed. They essentially extended their spring break. And one of the reasons for that is, as a public school, if we're offering an educational program, then we're required to offer all aspects of that. So all the services that we provide are also required if we're operating a school, whether it's distance learning or site-based learning. So some of the guidance out there has been just close down completely since you can't provide all the services yet. The best thing to do is to shut down and essentially extend the spring break. We didn't think that was the best for kids. So we jumped immediately on day one, March 16th, into a voluntary program. That's why we encourage you to come pick up devices, to come pick up materials, just so for kids to have some sort of continuity, some sort of routine, a connection to their school. That's why we went with a voluntary program, even though we knew we weren't ready to provide all of the services that we provided to school. We wanted to offer kids something resembling school. So we were careful to kind of call it voluntary. Now we've used that time to kind of prepare other services that we need to offer. And starting on April 6th, we will call that compulsory education. most of your kids will not know the difference, right? They've been getting stuff pushed out by their teachers. They'll continue to get daily kind of video greetings from their teachers. There'll be a little bit more structure and to what's happening April 6th, but it's not going to be drastically different for kids. Um, I'll talk a little bit about some of the differences, but that's the biggest difference between voluntary and compulsory. Is the reason for voluntary is no one's obligated to complete it, and then that gave us time to kind of put the services together, so that starting next week we could put those. And I'm talking about services like speech service, occupational therapy, some of the services that some of our kids require to have access to their school day. So now that we're ready for those pieces, we can shift into what we can consider compulsory education. So some features of what's to come on April 6th. In the feedback survey, some of you have asked for live lessons. We've been kind of discussing that already. Some teachers have kind of dabbled in that, and some of you, your own children, have participated in that already. So this will start to happen on a more routine structure or schedule. Live lessons will take place from general ed teachers, special education teachers, and our enrichment teachers as well. Again, several of them have already been playing with this, and now we'll go school-wide with it on Monday. Special education services, like I mentioned earlier, will commence. For parents of students who receive special ed services, Dr. Moreno is going to host a more specific special education kind of a live session like this, well, like the coffee, but for families with students receiving services to go into the details. Another thing to come starting Monday is more of a routine schedule for kids. I'll share a little bit about that momentarily. And we're also putting together tutoring. So we have a team of awesome paraprofessionals and aides and so on that are going to be available to provide tutoring during the school day for kids who would benefit from it. So we'll push that out in the next few days as well. So just a sample schedule of what next week will start to look like. This is a third grade day, typical third grade day. You'll notice that at 8:30 there's a live reading lesson that the teacher's doing, that Ms. Alvarez or Ms. Gil Colon are providing. You'll notice that it really doesn't go more than 30 minutes. And in this example, it's a reading lesson. Then there's some independent work time offered that is also directed by the teacher, in the sense that the teacher will assign what can take place during that time, some accountability with a reading log, and then another live lesson in math that will take place, followed with more independent work time. So if you look at that, between 8:30 and 10, your child has got math and ELA instruction, or English Language Arts instruction, and some independent work time. This is considerably shorter than the amount of instruction they get on a typical school day where they're at school. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Then there's kind of a nice break for lunch right between independent work time and then enrichment. And in this particular example, there's Mandarin is offered at 12:15 for about half an hour live lesson with Miss Janice. On another day of the week, this might be PE or STEAM lab or world language or another Spanish for our older students, or music with Mr. Raven. So notice the condensed time. One of the reasons for that is when you look at virtual school models and even homeschool, which we're not providing homeschool, but there's a lot of overlap, obviously, with what we're doing now in distance learning. The school day in those days, in those models, are considerably shorter than your typical classroom-based, site-based school day. So we're following suit there. We don't want to overwhelm families. We know that there's a lot on your plates right now. There's a lot you're grappling with. So we want to continue school, but we want to make it manageable and looking at best practices out there. So in short, as distance learning school day is shorter than a classroom-based school day. You'll experience that with us as well. So essentially that less is more approach. In the elementary grades, you should expect about 2 hours of content daily, math, ELA, and so on. In junior high, that probably will get closer to 3 hours. One thing, I'm going to jump back to the last slide. If we were looking at a seventh grade or eighth grade schedule, you would also see science in this morning block as well. Your elementary teachers will incorporate history, science into English language arts and some in math. And then STEAM Lab will also incorporate, obviously, some science there as well. But the dedicated daily instruction will be English language arts, math. PE will be taught twice a week. PE coaches are encouraging daily physical activity, but they'll do live lessons twice a week. Mandarin, music, Spanish, STEAM Lab, they'll be once a week in these early afternoon time slots. One more thing on this. So schedules like this will be going out for each of the grade levels so that you kind of have a sense of what to do. This is just one example. Miss Alvarez or Miss Gil-Colon in third grade might make some shifts, but generally this is what you can expect for April 6th and on. So this is a section, the moment where we went to some questions. So some of the questions from this morning that I want to repeat. And then for those of you watching, we'll follow your watching of this video with a live Q&A for some of the questions that you have that were not already addressed. One of the questions that parents had yearbooks. Yes, yearbooks are still being completed. You can mail us a check to Allegiance STEAM Academy for $40. Please put your child's name in the memo note of the check. We are still, under Mr. Shipe's leadership, we are still going to complete and have yearbooks available. Someone asked about 8th grade promotion. So I can't really confirm what will happen with that. If our plan is to return after May 1st. If we're back in school and there aren't any restrictions on gatherings, and we would love to hold promotion. If the county, health department is not allowing or giving orders regarding gatherings, then we may not be able to have promotion. So it really boils down to what the guidelines are, safety and health guidelines are. We were also asked about sort of Google Classroom tutorials. Teachers are taking those now, so just make sure they're making the most of Google Classroom. We are also looking for some that we can push out for you parents, so that you have a better understanding of what's happening with those. We'd love to, to push those out to you guys as well. We were asked about grades. We're figuring that out, beginning April 6th, since it's no longer voluntary, grading will happen in some iteration. We are still figuring this out. We're also working with Chino Valley on it. You may have noticed, if you're connected to other schools, whether they're in Chino or in surrounding districts, there's work to be done to figure out what grading will look like in this model. But know that it will, because we are, again, offering compulsory education starting Monday. Once we know the details of what grading will look like for us, we'll share that with you. So you can expect a report card at the end of the year. Still, that will be the case. It obviously will be influenced greatly by this school closure, but we have every plan to continue grading in some fashion, and we'll get that to you shortly. Lastly on that, just we are collaborating with Chino Valley on that. So it's very important for our 8th graders as they finish with us and then go on to high school. So we want to make sure that they're as prepared as possible, and their grades reflect that. So we were asked about yearbooks. We were asked about grading. We were asked about graduation. We were also some other questions we were asked, that some of them just, if there's specific questions around curriculum and so on, I would ask your teacher. I think those are questions that, if asked of your teacher, you get a specific answer from them rather than a general one from me. So yeah, anything around like, will such and such teacher continue to offer spelling lists and so on? Those are classroom questions that I ask you take to your teachers. these are some of the questions that were asked this morning. And yes, so we'll follow this video of our coffee with an opportunity, a live opportunity to ask your questions that were not asked. Um, and again, if anyone's watching this who attended the coffee, please don't attend the next coffee, just so we leave room for those who didn't get a chance to jump on because we ran out of room in today's. Thanks so much. And yes, April 1st at 8:30, we will have the follow-up Q&A to this video. Thank you.